The mail came late on Tuesday afternoon, sliding through the brass slot in my apartment door with that distinctive metallic scrape I'd heard for 36 years. I was making tea in the kitchen, Earl Grey, the bergamot scent filling the small galley space, when I heard the soft thud of envelopes hitting the hardwood floor. I didn't rush. At 68, I'd learned the value of not rushing. My knees complained on the subway stairs these days. My hands sometimes ached when rain was coming, and I'd made peace with the slower rhythms of my body. But when I walked into the entryway and saw that cream envelope among the bills and grocery store circulars, something in my chest tightened. The cardstock was thick, expensive, the kind you had to special order from a stationer. My name, Mrs. Margaret Collins, was written in elegant calligraphy across the front. No return address needed. I knew exactly who it was from. I carried it to the living room, settling into the armchair by the window that overlooked 81st Street. October sunlight slanted through the glass, catching the dust motes that danced above the radiator. Down on the street, I could see mothers pushing strollers toward the playground entrance at Central Park. Delivery trucks double-parked outside the bodega, a dog walker managing 6 leashes with the practiced ease of someone who'd lived in the city their whole life. My fingers trembled as I slid them under the envelope flap. The invitation inside was exactly what I'd imagined Emily would choose. Classic, understated, with just a hint of modern edge in the font selection. Emily Rose Collins and Daniel James Brennan request the honor of your presence at their wedding Saturday, the 4th of October 2025, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the Glasshouse, 660, 12th Avenue, New York. New York reception to follow, black tie optional. I read it 3 times, my eyes blurring on the 3rd pass. Emily Rose. We'd named her after Robert's mother and my grandmother. She'd hated the name Rose as a teenager, refused to use it on any school forms, but here it was in formal script, like she'd made peace with it. The Glasshouse. I'd passed it once or twice, walking along the High Line with my book club friends. Modern, expensive, all steel and glass, and carefully curated industrial chic. Nothing like the small Baptist church in Queens where Robert and I had married in 1983. With folding chairs and flowers from the Korean grocery and a reception in the church basement with chicken salad sandwiches. I set the invitation on the coffee table and walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Down the street, the towers of the San Remo rose against the October sky, their twin peaks of familiar comfort. I'd lived in this rent-controlled 2-bedroom since 1989, when Emily was 4 and Robert had just made paralegal at the firm downtown. Back then, you could still afford the Upper West Side on a legal secretary's and paralegal's combined salary. Before the neighborhood became synonymous with Ivy League professors and hedge fund managers. My phone sat on the side table, silent. Emily hadn't called to tell me the invitation was coming. Hadn't texted. 3 years of carefully maintained distance, of holiday cards with generic messages, of emails that read like corporate communications, polite, informative, empty. The last real conversation we'd had was Thanksgiving 2022. She'd come over for dinner, just the 2 of us. Dan had been in Connecticut with his family. I'd made all her favorites: herb-roasted turkey breast, sweet potato casserole with the pecan topping she'd loved as a child, the cranberry sauce I made from scratch every year. We'd opened wine early, too early, drinking while I cooked, and she set the table with the good china I only used for holidays. Everything had been fine until dessert. I'd asked, casually I thought, how they were planning to afford a wedding. Dan worked for a nonprofit focused on affordable housing advocacy. Emily managed grants for an environmental justice organization. Good work? Important work. But neither paid particularly well. "We're fine, Mom," she'd said. her voice taking on that edge I'd learned to recognize. The edge that meant I'd stepped on something tender. I'm just saying, weddings are expensive. Your father's life insurance money is still sitting there. I could help. I want to help. The wine glass in her hand had stopped halfway to her mouth. You want to help now? Of course I want to help. You're my daughter. This is your wedding. She'd set down the glass carefully. Too carefully. Where was that money when I was working 3 jobs in college? When I was choosing between textbooks and groceries? When I called you crying because I didn't know how I'd pay for graduation cap and gown rental? Emily, that's not fair. The situation was different. Different how? She'd stood up then, her chair scraping loud against the hardwood. Dad died and suddenly there's $200,000? Where was that money my whole childhood when you kept telling me we couldn't afford things? That money was from your father's life insurance. It was for emergencies, for what? For keeping in a savings account while your daughter worked herself into exhaustion. Her voice had cracked and I saw tears in her eyes. I worked 40 hours a week on top of a full course load, Mom. I ate ramen for dinner most nights. I didn't go on spring break trips. I didn't study abroad. I didn't do anything that cost money because I thought we were actually poor. I thought asking you for help would put you in some terrible position. We were struggling, I'd said, hearing the defensiveness in my own voice. Your father's medical bills, the credit card debt he'd hidden, you never told me that. You never explained. You just said no to everything and made me feel guilty for asking. She'd grabbed her coat from the hook by the door. I can't do this tonight. I need to go. Emily, please, don't leave like this. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, Mom. You made your choices. You chose security over helping me. That's fine. That's your right. But don't expect me to feel grateful for money now when I needed it years ago. She'd left, and I'd sat at that table with 2 pieces of untouched pumpkin pie, staring at the empty chair across from me. I'd tried calling the next day. She'd texted back, need some space. I'll reach out when I'm ready. That was 3 years ago. The space had never closed. Now I held her wedding invitation in my hands, this formal piece of cardstock that felt like a test I didn't know how to pass. My phone buzzed, startling me out of the memory. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Hello? Mrs. Collins? This is Vera Chen from Elegant Events. I'm the coordinator for Emily and Dan's wedding. Her voice was professionally warm, the kind of warmth that came from managing difficult family dynamics every weekend. I'm calling to confirm your RSVP and go over some logistics. My throat felt tight. I'm coming. Of course I'm coming. Wonderful. I have you down for one guest. Your seat will be in the 3rd row on the bride's side family section. She paused, and I heard papers rustling. There's also a rehearsal dinner tomorrow evening at Cipriani Downtown, 6:30. Cocktail attire. The address is 3rd row? The words came out before I could stop them. Another pause, longer this time. Yes, ma'am. 3rd row, aisle seat, not front row. Not where the mother of the bride traditionally sat. 3rd row, like I was extended family, a distant cousin, someone who needed to be included but not prominently featured. That's fine, I managed. Thank you for calling, Vera. After she hung up, I sat there holding my phone, watching the afternoon light shift across my living room walls. The walls were covered with photographs. Emily's school pictures from kindergarten through high school, her gap-toothed smile gradually straightening with braces, her Juilliard acceptance letter framed, a photo from her college graduation, Robert thin and pale from the chemotherapy, but smiling, his arm around Emily's shoulders. The last good picture I had of the 3 of us together, Robert had died 4 months after that photo was taken. Pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, it was stage 4, already metastasized. They'd given us 6 months. We got 4. Emily had moved back home, taken a leave from her graduate program at Columbia. We'd navigated hospice together, the hospital bed in our living room, the morphine schedule, the terrible slow decline. She'd held his hand at the end, both of us there, and afterward we'd clung to each other in the hospital corridor and cried until we couldn't breathe. When had that closeness broken? When had my daughter started seeing me as the enemy? I stood up and walked to the kitchen, rinsing my cold tea down the sink. Through the window, I could see the fire escape where Emily used to sit as a teenager, reading books and listening to music on her headphones, escaping into her own world. I'd learned not to disturb her during those times, to let her have her space, her privacy, her independence. Maybe I'd given her too much space. Maybe I'd let the distance grow when I should have fought harder to close it. Outside, the October afternoon was fading into evening, the light turning golden. I had 24 hours until the rehearsal dinner. 24 hours to figure out how to be the mother Emily would allow at her wedding. I pulled out my phone and typed a message. Got the invitation. So happy for you. Can't wait to celebrate with you both. I stared at it for 5 full minutes before deleting every word. What could I possibly say that wouldn't sound hollow, wouldn't feel like too much or not enough? In the end, I sent nothing. I'd see her tomorrow. I'd try to do better than words on a screen. The next morning, I woke at dawn, my mind already racing. The rehearsal dinner was 12 hours away. I had time to prepare, to plan, to figure out exactly what to say if Emily gave me the chance to say anything at all. Made coffee in the French press Robert had. Bought me for our 20th anniversary. The last anniversary. We'd celebrated together. The coffee was strong and bitter, the way I'd learned to like it during those long nights sitting with him during his final months, trying to stay awake in case he needed anything. At my small kitchen table, I opened my laptop and Googled, "What to say to estranged daughter at wedding." The results were depressingly sparse. Reddit threads from other mothers in similar situations, advice columns with generic platitudes about being present and respecting boundaries. Nothing that felt like it would actually help. By 9, I'd given up on the internet and called my sister Linda in New Jersey. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy. "Maggie? It's Saturday morning. This better be good. The wedding's today. The rehearsal dinner is tonight." Silence. Then, "Oh, honey, how are you feeling?" Terrified. I pressed my hand to my forehead. "Linda, what if she doesn't want me there? What if I make things worse? Then you'll deal with it. But you're her mother, Mag. You have to show up. You have to try. I don't know what to wear. I don't know what to say. I don't start with the dress. That's concrete. You can control that." Linda's voice shifted into practical mode, the tone she'd used when we were kids and I'd come to her with problems. "What did you buy?" "Navy cocktail dress. Bloomingdale's. It's safe. Safe is good for tonight. Tomorrow you need to look like the mother of the bride without outshining the bride. You have something for the actual wedding? Dove gray lace, knee length, also safe. Perfect. Now here's what you're going to do." Linda took a breath. "Tonight you're going to smile. You're going to be gracious. You're going to tell Emily she looks beautiful. Tell Dan you're happy to welcome him to the family, and you're not going to bring up anything from the past. Not one word about money, about college, about Thanksgiving 3 years ago. Nothing. You're going to be present, pleasant, and then you're going to go home. Understand? What if she won't even talk to me? Then you smile at her from across the room and you don't push. Maggie, listen to me. This weekend is not about fixing your relationship. It's about showing up and not making things worse. That's it. That's all you can do right now." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, turning Linda's words over in my mind. Don't make things worse. It felt like such a low bar. and yet I wasn't sure I could clear it. I spent the rest of the morning and early afternoon getting ready with excruciating care. I washed my hair twice, blow-dried it straight, touched up the gray at my temples with the color I kept under the bathroom sink. I did my makeup carefully, foundation to cover the dark circles, mascara, a subtle lip color that wouldn't draw attention. I wanted to look put together without looking like I'd tried too hard. The navy dress fit well, skimming over the weight I'd gained since Robert died, hiding the soft belly and the thickness around my middle that came with age and grief. I added small pearl earrings, my mother's, and the thin gold necklace Robert had given me on Emily's first birthday. By 5 o'clock, I was dressed and ready, standing in front of my full-length mirror and barely recognizing myself. When had I become this woman? This nervous, uncertain person afraid of her own daughter? I called a car service because my hands were shaking too much to manage the subway. The driver was a quiet man in his 50s who didn't try to make conversation, for which I was grateful. We went down through Central Park, the leaves just starting to turn, golden and red against the gray October sky. The car pulled up to Cipriani Downtown just before 6:30. The restaurant occupied a former bank building in the financial district, all marble columns and soaring ceilings, and the kind of old New York grandeur that whispered money. Through the tall windows, I could see people already gathered inside, holding cocktails, laughing. I paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, gathering courage. A young couple passed me, arm in arm, and the woman was wearing a burgundy dress that made me think of bridesmaids. Emily's wedding party, probably. I followed them inside. The host station was staffed by a young woman with a headset and a tablet. Name, please? Margaret Collins, mother of the bride. She scrolled through her list, found my name, and her professional smile flickered just slightly. Of course, right this way. She led me through the cocktail area where guests were mingling, mostly people in their 30s. Stylish and confident, the kind of crowd that worked in nonprofits and tech startups, who summered in the Hamptons on friends' couches, and knew which Brooklyn neighborhoods were worth the rent. I recognized a few faces from Emily's college years, but most were strangers. And then I saw her. Emily stood near the windows overlooking Stone Street, and my breath caught. She'd cut her hair since I'd last seen her. A sleek dark bob that made her look older, more sophisticated. She wore an emerald green silk dress that clung to her shoulders and fell in perfect lines to her knees. She'd always been beautiful, but now she was stunning, polished, like someone who belonged in this marble hall with these confident people. Dan stood beside her, his hand on her waist. I'd only met him twice, once briefly when they first started dating, and once at a stiff coffee meetup where we'd all struggled through small talk. He was tall, with an easy smile and wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of man who looked like he'd played lacrosse in college and still ran marathons on weekends. His parents stood nearby. I recognized them from their wedding website photos. His mother wore pearls and a Talbot's dress. His father a blazer with brass buttons. Connecticut casual, old money trying to look humble. Mrs. Collins? A woman appeared at my elbow, tall, blonde Dan's mother. Caroline Brennan. We're so delighted you could make it. Her handshake was firm, her smile practiced. Thank you for including me, I managed. Of course. You're Emily's mother. The way she said it felt loaded, like she knew exactly how complicated that statement was. Can I get you a drink? They're serving champagne and wine, and I think there's a bar for cocktails. White wine would be lovely. She signaled a server, who brought me a glass of something pale and French. I sipped it, crisp, dry, expensive, and tried to look natural standing there among strangers. Emily's told us a bit about you, Caroline continued, and I braced myself. She mentioned you work in law? I'm a paralegal. 42 years at Rothstein and Associates. How wonderful. Such dedication. Her tone was kind but distant, the way you'd talk to someone's elderly aunt. The dinner's starting soon. You're at table 7, I believe. My sister Judith is there. She's lovely. You'll enjoy her company. Table 7. I nodded, smiled, and let myself be guided toward the dining room as the coordinator announced that everyone should find their seats. The dining room was even more spectacular than the cocktail area. Long tables draped in white linen, candlelight reflecting off crystal glasses, centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Place cards directed guests to their seats, and I found mine at table 7, which was, naturally, at the very back of the room, near the kitchen doors. My table mates included Dan's elderly Aunt Judith, who was mostly deaf and spent dinner cupping her ear and saying, "What's that?" to everything. A groomsman's girlfriend who was on her phone the entire time. Dan's cousin from Vermont who talked exclusively about his new Tesla. And an older couple I never quite figured out how they were connected to anyone. From my seat, I had a clear view of the head table where Emily and Dan sat with the wedding party. 6 bridesmaids in matching burgundy, 6 groomsmen in dark suits. Emily was laughing at something her maid of honor said, her face bright and happy, completely at ease. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her look that relaxed around me. The food came in elaborate courses, each one announced by servers who'd clearly been trained in the art of making mediocre food sound spectacular. Burrata with heirloom tomatoes and aged balsamic. Branzino with Meyer lemon and crispy fennel. Beef tenderloin with truffle butter. I pushed everything around my plate, my stomach too tight to eat. After the main course was cleared, Dan's father stood up with his champagne glass. Richard Brennan looked exactly like what he was, a managing partner at a Connecticut law firm, comfortable with public speaking, used to commanding a room. "I won't take too much time," he said, his voice carrying easily. "I know everyone's eager to get to dessert." Polite laughter rippled through the room. But I wanted to say a few words about my son and his beautiful bride-to-be. Dan, you've been a source of joy and pride since the day you were born. Watching you grow into the man you are today, thoughtful, principled, committed to making the world better, has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. He turned toward Emily. And Emily, from the moment Dan brought you home for Thanksgiving 4 years ago, we knew you were special. The way you challenged him, supported him, made him laugh. We're so grateful to welcome you into our family. To Emily and Dan. Everyone raised their glasses. I lifted mine automatically, the champagne bitter on my tongue. Then Dan stood, tapping his glass gently. The room quieted. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." He took Emily's hand. "I want to say something before we all head out for the night. I know this weekend's been intense with all the planning and logistics, but I need everyone here to understand something about this woman." Emily looked up at him, her eyes already shining. "Your strength, your independence, the way you built yourself into this incredible person. That's what made me fall in love with you. You didn't have an easy path. You worked for everything you have. You didn't take shortcuts, didn't rely on anyone else, didn't expect the world to give you anything you hadn't earned. And that fierce self-reliance, that determination, it's beautiful. It's inspiring. And I'm so grateful that you chose me, that you let me be part of your life, your team, your future." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Emily stood and kissed him, and people whistled and called out. I sat frozen, my champagne glass halfway to my mouth. You didn't rely on anyone else. The words felt aimed at me, whether Dan meant them that way or not. A celebration of Emily's independence that was simultaneously an indictment of my failure to support her. Caroline Brennan stood next, giving a gracious toast about welcoming Emily into their family, about the grandchildren she hoped would come someday, about traditions and legacies. She mentioned Robert once, Emily's late father, who I'm sure would be so proud to see this day, but didn't mention me at all. Then the maid of honor, Simone, stood. I remembered her vaguely from college, a theater major, loud and funny and always pulling Emily into adventures. I'm going to keep this short because I tend to cry, she started, and people laughed. Em, you've been my best friend for over a decade. You've seen me at my worst and you didn't run away. You showed up with ice cream and wine and terrible reality TV, and you made me believe I could survive. She paused, gathering herself. You taught me that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who chooses you day after day, who shows up when you need them, who doesn't make love conditional. She raised her glass. You and Dan are family in the truest sense. You choose each other every single day. And the rest of us are so lucky to be part of your chosen family, too. Who doesn't make love conditional? I felt the words like a slap. Was that how Emily saw me? Someone whose love came with conditions, with prices, with requirements? The toasts ended. Dessert came, individual chocolate souffle with crème anglaise. People returned to their conversations, the energy in the room shifting from formal to relaxed. At the head table, Emily was laughing again, her head thrown back, her hand on Dan's arm. I needed to try. I needed to at least say something to her before the night ended. I waited until people started gathering their coats and purses, the dinner clearly winding down. Then I made my way to the head table, where Emily was hugging one of her bridesmaids. Emily. She turned, and for a split second, I saw something flash across her face. Surprise, maybe, or discomfort. Then her expression smoothed into polite neutrality. Hi, Mom. You look beautiful. That dress is stunning on you. Thanks. She glanced at Dan, who was talking to his best man a few feet away. Did you enjoy dinner? The question was perfunctory, something you'd ask a distant relative. Everything was lovely. You and Dan have wonderful taste. An awkward pause. Emily shifted her weight, her body language screaming that she wanted this conversation to end. I just wanted to say, I pressed on, hearing the desperation in my voice, that I'm so happy to be here, to see you happy. That's all I've ever wanted, sweetheart, just for you to be happy. Her jaw tightened. We should probably get going. Big day tomorrow. Emily, please. I reached for her hand and she pulled back slightly. Can we talk? Just for a few minutes? There's so much I want to say. Not tonight, Mom. Her voice was firm, but not unkind. Tomorrow's already going to be emotional. I don't have the energy for this right now. But please. She looked me directly in the eyes, and I saw exhaustion there, and something else. Pain, maybe, or resignation. I'll see you tomorrow. At the wedding? She turned away before I could respond, looping her arm through Dan's and heading toward the exit where her bridesmaids were waiting. I stood there watching her go, feeling every single one of my 68 years settling into my bones. Around me, guests were saying goodbye, making plans to meet at hotel bars, calling car services. I slipped out through a side door and stood on Stone Street, the October night cool against my flushed face. I walked toward the subway at Wall Street, my heels clicking on the cobblestones. The city was alive with Friday night energy, young people spilling out of bars, couples holding hands, taxis honking. Everyone else's life moving forward while mine felt frozen in this awful limbo. On the subway ride home, I replayed every moment of the evening. The toasts about chosen family, Dan's speech about Emily's self-reliance, the way she'd pulled away when I reached for her hand, all of it adding up to one clear message. I was invited to the wedding, but I wasn't welcome in her life. Back in my apartment, I hung up my navy dress and washed my face, scrubbing away the carefully applied makeup until my skin was pink and raw. In the mirror, I looked old and tired and sad. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow I'd have to smile and be gracious and watch my daughter marry a man I barely knew, surrounded by people who loved her in ways I apparently never had. Tomorrow. But tonight, I let myself cry. I woke at 5:30, yanked from sleep by a dream I couldn't quite remember. Something about running through Central Park, searching for Emily, calling her name while she stayed just out of sight. The apartment was still dark, the streetlights outside casting orange shadows across my bedroom ceiling. I lay there for a while, listening to the city wake up around me. The garbage trucks making their Saturday morning rounds on Columbus Avenue, their hydraulic brakes hissing. Someone's dog barking 3 floors down, the distant wail of a siren heading south, probably toward Roosevelt Hospital. By 6, I gave up on sleep and padded into the kitchen to make coffee. The sky outside was just beginning to lighten, that gray pre-dawn October light that promised nothing about what kind of day it would be. Rain? Sunshine? The forecast had been uncertain all week, typical autumn weather that couldn't make up its mind. I stood at the window in my bathrobe, watching a jogger in neon yellow circle the playground across the street, her ponytail swinging with each stride. October 4th. My daughter's wedding day. The day I'd been both hoping for and dreading for 3 years. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Linda. Today's the day. You've got this. Call me after. Love you, I typed back. Thank you. Love you too. The hours stretched ahead of me, vast and empty. The wedding wasn't until 4 o'clock. 10 hours to fill. 10 hours to sit with my anxiety and regret and hope. 10 hours to replay last night's rehearsal dinner over and over, analyzing every word Emily had said to me, every word she hadn't. I made toast I didn't eat. Poured orange juice I let sit untouched on the counter. Scrolled through news on my phone without retaining anything. The apartment felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. I needed to move, to get outside, to do something with the nervous energy crackling through my body. By 9, I was showered and staring at my closet, at the dove-gray lace dress hanging there like a question I didn't know how to answer. The dress was beautiful. I'd tried on 17 options at Bloomingdale's before settling on this one. It had 3/4 sleeves to hide my aging arms, a modest neckline, a hem that hit just below my knees. Safe. Appropriate. Forgettable. Not yet. If I got dressed now, I'd spend the whole day feeling trapped in wedding guest costume, unable to relax, unable to breathe. Instead, I pulled on jeans and a sweater and my walking shoes. I grabbed my coat and headed out. The October morning was cool and overcast, the kind of weather that could go either way. I walked to the park entrance at 81st Street. The same entrance I'd used thousands of times over the past 36 years. The guard booth was empty. They only staffed it in the evenings now. I passed through the stone gates and onto the path that wound toward Belvedere Castle. Central Park on a Saturday morning was full of life. Joggers with their earbuds and determined expressions, dog walkers managing multiple leashes, families with young children heading toward the playgrounds. I walked slowly, my hands in my pockets, breathing in the smell of fallen leaves and damp earth. This park held so many memories. Teaching Emily to ride her bike on the path near Sheep Meadow, running behind her with my hand on the seat, then letting go and watching her wobble forward on her own, her delighted squeal when she realized she was doing it. Picnics on summer afternoons, Emily sprawled on a blanket reading Harry Potter books, her legs grass-stained and her face sunburned. Ice skating at Woolman Rink in winter, both of us clumsy and laughing, drinking hot chocolate after with frozen fingers wrapped around paper cups. When had we stopped doing those things? When had the easy closeness turned into careful distance? I found myself walking toward Bow Bridge without consciously deciding to go there. The path curved through trees just starting to turn autumn colors, gold and orange and deep red. Tourists were already out with their cameras, taking selfies against the lake backdrop. I stopped in the middle of the bridge, leaning against the railing, looking out at the water. The lake was dark and still, reflecting the overcast sky. Across the water, I could see the towers of the San Remo and the Beresford rising above the tree line. Those iconic, twin-peaked buildings that had been part of my view of home for decades. Robert had proposed to me on this bridge. August 1982, a hot summer evening just before sunset. We'd been dating for 2 years, living in a tiny apartment in Queens, both working entry-level jobs and dreaming of better. He'd brought me to the park after work, said he wanted to watch the sunset somewhere pretty. I'd known something was up. He'd been nervous all day, fidgeting with something in his pocket. Right here, almost exactly where I was standing now, he'd gotten down on one knee. The ring was small, all he could afford on a paralegal's salary, but I'd loved it. I'd said yes before he even finished asking the question. "Penny for your thoughts?" A voice beside me made me jump. An older man stood a few feet away, walking a small terrier on a red leash. He wore a Yankees cap and a windbreaker, the uniform of retired New Yorkers spending their Saturday morning in the park. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you," he said, smiling. "You just looked very far away." "Just remembering," I said. "Good memories, I hope?" "Some good, some complicated." I gestured at my clothes. "I'm killing time before a wedding. Trying not to think too much. Yours or someone else's?" He leaned against the railing beside me, and the terrier sniffed at my shoes. "My daughter's." "Ah." He nodded knowingly. "Those are the hardest kind, aren't they? The ones where you realize your baby's really grown, really leaving." "She left a long time ago," I said quietly. "I'm just catching up to that fact." He looked at me more carefully, and something in his expression shifted. "Complicated, then?" "Very." "But you're going anyway." "I'm going anyway. I just don't know if she really wants me there." The man was quiet for a moment, watching his dog sniff around the bridge. "I've got 3 daughters," he said finally. "All grown now, all with families of their own. And I can tell you, they all went through phases where they were angry at me, disappointed in me, sure I'd failed them in some fundamental way." "How did you get through it?" "I showed up. That's all you can do, really. Show up and hope eventually they see you were doing the best you could." He straightened, tugging gently on the leash. "Good luck today. I hope it goes better than you expect." He walked on, the terrier trotting beside him, and I stood there watching them go. Show up. It sounded so simple. I stayed in the park until noon, walking aimlessly, sitting on benches, watching people live their normal Saturday lives. By the time I headed home, the sky had cleared somewhat, patches of blue showing through the gray. Maybe that was a sign, maybe. Back at my apartment, I made myself eat something. A turkey sandwich that tasted like cardboard, an apple I managed half of. Then I started the careful process of getting ready. I washed my face with the expensive cleanser I'd bought specifically for this weekend. Applied the moisturizer with sunscreen the woman at Sephora had insisted I needed. My hair went into hot rollers, a trick I'd learned from my mother, who'd taught me that soft curls were more forgiving on aging faces than straight hair. While the rollers set, I did my makeup. Foundation to even out my skin tone and hide the age spots that had appeared over the past decade. Concealer under my eyes for the dark circles. A subtle eyeshadow in soft browns. Mascara carefully applied because my hands weren't as steady as they used to be. Blush on the apples of my cheeks. Lipstick and a muted rose that wouldn't draw too much attention. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, at this 68-year-old woman trying so hard to look presentable, acceptable, like someone who deserved to be at her daughter's wedding. When had I become so uncertain about my own face? When had I started seeing every wrinkle as a failure? The rollers came out at 2:30, and I brushed through the curls until they fell in soft waves around my face. Not bad, not beautiful, but acceptable. That would have to be enough. The dove gray lace dress slid over my head easily. I'd had it altered at the tailor on Amsterdam Avenue, the same tailor who'd hemmed Emily's prom dress back in 2015, who'd taken in Robert's suits when he started losing weight during the cancer. The dress fit perfectly now, skimming over my body without clinging, the lace overlay hiding the parts of me I didn't want to see. I added my mother's pearl earrings, the ones she'd worn at her own wedding in 1954. The gold necklace Robert had given me when Emily was born, a simple chain with a tiny pendant engraved with Emily's birth date. Low heels in nude that wouldn't kill my feet during the hours of standing ahead. My good coat, charcoal gray, appropriate for October weather. At 3:15, I stood in my living room, completely ready, with 45 minutes to kill. I couldn't sit. I'd wrinkle the dress. I couldn't eat or drink. I'd risk spilling something. So I stood at the window, looking down at 81st Street, watching the afternoon unfold. A young couple was moving into the building across the street, carrying boxes up the front steps. Two kids on scooters raced past, their mother calling after them to slow down. An elderly man walked by with a cane, stopping every few steps to catch his breath. Normal Saturday afternoon. For everyone but me. My phone rang at 3:30. Unknown number. Hello? Mrs. Collins? This is Vera Chen, the wedding coordinator. I wanted to confirm you're planning to arrive by 3:45. We're seating guests starting at 3:45, and the ceremony begins promptly at 4. I'll be there, I said. I'm leaving now. Wonderful. When you arrive, check in at the host stand and someone will show you to your seat. 3rd row, aisle seat on the bride's side. Thank you, Vera. I hung up and stood there for another moment, my coat over my arm, my small clutch purse in my hand. This was it. No more waiting, no more preparing. Time to go watch my daughter get married. I called a car service, the same one I'd used last night, and stood on the sidewalk waiting while my driver navigated weekend traffic. The afternoon had turned clearer, the sky now mostly blue with high white clouds. Good wedding weather. Emily would be happy about that. The ride to Chelsea took 25 minutes, crawling through Central Park and down the west side. My driver, a different man than last night, younger with a thick accent I couldn't place, tried to make small talk about the weather, the traffic, the Yankees. I gave him polite one-word answers, and he eventually gave up, letting me sit in silence. The Glasshouse appeared on the corner of 12th Avenue and 25th Street, all steel and glass and carefully preserved brick. Ivy climbed the exterior walls, and through the enormous windows, I could see white chairs arranged in neat rows, an arch covered in flowers, late afternoon light streaming through the glass ceiling. It was beautiful. Of course it was beautiful. Emily wouldn't settle for anything less. Guests were arriving in clusters, mostly people around Emily's age, the 30-something nonprofit crowd in their carefully curated wedding attire. The women wore jewel-toned dresses and architectural earrings. The men wore suits without ties or suits with quirky socks. Everyone looking effortlessly stylish in that way young people managed without seeming to try. I paid my driver and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching people stream inside. A few of them glanced at me, this older woman in gray, standing alone, but no one stopped to talk. I recognized a few faces from Emily's college years, from the handful of events I'd been invited to before the distance became permanent. But I didn't know any of their names, Didn't know how they fit into Emily's current life. Inside, the entrance was set up with a host stand and a young woman with a tablet and a professional smile. Behind her, I could see into the ceremony space, the rows of white chairs, maybe 200 seats, all facing an arch absolutely covered in white roses, white hydrangeas, eucalyptus, and some trailing vine I didn't recognize. The glass ceiling soared above everything, and the late afternoon sun created patterns of light and shadow across the concrete floor. "Name, please?" the hostess asked. "Margaret Collins, mother of the bride." Her smile didn't waver, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. She'd been briefed. She knew the situation was complicated. "Of course, Mrs. Collins. Let me show you to your seat." She led me through the growing crowd toward the ceremony space. Most of the seats were still empty. We were early. The ceremony wouldn't start for another 15 minutes. But a few people had already settled in. I saw Dan's parents in the front row on the right side, his mother still in her pearls, his father checking his phone. The front row on the left side, the bride's side, was empty except for one reserved sign. The hostess led me past that front row, past the second row, and stopped at the third row. "Right here, Mrs. Collins, aisle seat. Can I get you anything? Water? Program?" "A program would be nice." "Thank you." She handed me a cream cardstock program that matched the invitation, gave me another professional smile, and disappeared. I sat down carefully, smoothing my dress, and looked at the program. The wedding of Emily Rose Collins and Daniel James Brennan, Saturday, October 4th, 2025. Inside were the ceremony details, the wedding party names, the order of events, the names of the songs they'd chosen. I read through it twice, trying to absorb information, trying to feel connected to this event I'd had no part in planning. More guests arrived, the seats filling up. People greeted each other with hugs and exclamations, took selfies, admired the flowers. I sat quietly, trying to look natural, like I belonged there. A woman about my age slid into the seat next to me. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said, gesturing at the arch. "Stunning," I agreed. "How do you know the couple?" The question I'd been dreading. "I'm Emily's mother." "Oh." Her expression shifted, something complicated crossing her face. "I'm Barbara Chen, Vera's mother. I'm just here because my daughter's coordinating and she needed someone to fill a seat." She paused. "Emily seems like a lovely young woman. You must be so proud." "I am," I said, and my voice cracked slightly. "Very proud." Barbara patted my hand, a quick gesture of sympathy, and I realized she knew. Vera had told her mother. Everyone probably knew that the mother of the bride was sitting in the third row like a distant cousin, that there was some family drama, some complication. The seats continued to fill. By 10 to 4, the space was nearly full, easily 200 people, all dressed in their wedding finery, all here to celebrate Emily and Dan. A string quartet in the corner began to play. Something classical I didn't recognize. Soft and romantic. At 3:55, Vera appeared at the front, checking on last-minute details. She caught my eye across the room and gave me a small, encouraging nod. Then she disappeared again. The music shifted, Pachelbel's canon, the traditional wedding processional. Everyone stood. My heart hammered in my chest. The groomsmen came first, walking down the aisle in pairs, taking their places by the arch. Dan's best man, Kevin, plus 5 others I didn't know. Then the bridesmaids, 6 women in deep burgundy dresses, each carrying a simple bouquet of white roses. Simone, the maid of honor, came last, her smile bright and proud. Then everyone turned toward the back of the room. The music swelled, not the traditional bridal march, but something else, something modern and beautiful. And Emily appeared. She walked alone down the aisle, her choice, carrying a bouquet of white roses and eucalyptus. Her dress was ivory silk, simple and elegant, fitted through the bodice and flowing from the waist. Her dark hair was swept up in some complicated style I couldn't see clearly from where I sat, with a fingertip veil trailing behind her. She was absolutely radiant, her face glowing with happiness and nerves and joy. I felt tears start and blinked them back furiously. Not yet. Not here. I couldn't fall apart in the third row while everyone watched. Emily walked past me without looking in my direction. Her eyes were fixed on Dan, who stood at the arch watching her with an expression of complete adoration. When she reached him, he took both her hands, and they turned together toward the officiant, a woman in her 30s, probably a friend, wearing a simple black dress. "Please be seated," the officiant said, and everyone sat. The rustle of fabric, the quiet clearing of throats. Then silence. "We're gathered here today," she began, "to celebrate the love between Emily and Dan, to witness their commitment to each other, and to support them as they begin this new chapter of their lives together." I tried to focus on the words. Something about partnership and choice and creating your own definition of family. But my eyes kept drifting to Emily's back, to the elegant line of her dress, to her hand clasped in Dan's, my daughter. Getting married. Without me really being part of it, the vows came. Personal ones they'd written themselves. Dan went first. "Emily, from the moment I met you, I knew you were someone extraordinary. Your passion for justice, your fierce loyalty to the people you love, your willingness to fight for what's right even when it's hard. All of that made me want to be better, do better, try harder. I promise to be your partner in every sense of the word, to support your dreams, to challenge you when you need it, to comfort you when the world is too much. I promise to be your home." Then Emily. Her voice was strong, clear, not shaking at all. "Dan, you've shown me what it means to be truly seen and accepted. You've never tried to change me or fix me. You've just loved me as I am. Complicated, stubborn, sometimes too independent for my own good." People laughed softly. "I promise to let you in, to trust you, to build a life with you that's bigger and better than anything I could create alone. I promise to be your home, the way you've been mine. I promise to be your home." The emphasis on that word felt intentional, loaded. Home. The thing she'd been missing, the thing she'd found with Dan instead of with me. The ring exchange. The pronouncement. "I now pronounce you married. You may kiss." Dan pulled Emily close and kissed her, and the room erupted in applause and cheers. They turned to face everyone, both of them beaming, and the quartet launched into something upbeat and joyful. They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, followed by the wedding party. Emily passed right by me again, laughing at something Dan whispered in her ear. She didn't look in my direction. Not once. And just like that, my daughter was married, and I'd been nothing more than a witness in the third row. After the ceremony, ushers directed guests up to the rooftop terrace for cocktail hour. I followed the crowd, climbing the industrial metal stairs slowly because my knees were complaining and I didn't want to rush. Around me, people chattered excitedly about how beautiful the ceremony was. How stunning Emily looked, how sweet their vows were. The rooftop was spectacular. Views of the Hudson River in one direction, the Manhattan skyline in the other, the High Line visible just a block away. String lights had been hung overhead, and tall cocktail tables were scattered around the space with white tablecloths and small arrangements of roses. Servers circulated with trays of champagne and white wine, and I took a glass just to have something to do with my hands. A food station was set up along one side, past hors d'oeuvres on elegant small plates. Tuna tartare on wonton crisps, fig and goat cheese crostini, tiny lamb chops with mint, shrimp cocktail in individual shot glasses. Everything looked beautiful and tasted like nothing in my mouth. Emily and Dan were off having photos taken. I'd heard someone mention they were going to the High Line and Brooklyn Bridge Park for sunset shots. The guests mingled and drank and ate, everyone in high spirits, the October evening perfect and golden. I stood near the edge of the terrace, holding my wine, trying to look natural. A few people glanced at me, this older woman alone, but no one approached. I wasn't part of any of the friend groups, wasn't connected to the wedding party, wasn't anyone's plus one. Maggie? A familiar voice made me turn. Claire Rothstein, Emily's old piano teacher. She'd aged well, her hair completely silver now, but her face still bright and warm. She wore a deep purple dress and a genuine smile. Claire! I didn't realize you'd be here. Emily reached out a few months ago. She hugged me, and the warmth of it nearly undid me. Asked if I'd come. I was so touched. I taught her for 4 years? 5. From 7th grade through 11th. That's right. She was so talented. Claire's expression grew thoughtful. That Chopin nocturne she performed at the recital in 8th grade. I still think about it. She had such feeling, such maturity for her age. She loved playing, I said, and heard the past tense land heavily. I wish she'd kept it up. Claire looked at me carefully. Maggie, did she tell you why she stopped? She said she was too busy. High school got demanding, and she came to my studio when she was 16. Said she couldn't afford lessons anymore, that you told her the family needed to cut back on expenses. Claire's voice was gentle but firm. She cried for an hour in my studio. It broke my heart. I felt the ground tilt. We never told her to stop. We never stopped paying you. I know. I realized that later, when the next month's payment came through and I called to clarify. But by then, Emily had already made up her mind. She was too embarrassed to come back. Claire touched my arm. She was carrying a lot, wasn't she? A lot of assumptions about money, about what you could and couldn't afford. I didn't know, I whispered. She never said anything. She just announced one day that she was done with piano, that she wanted to focus on other things. Kids hear things we don't realize they're hearing. They make up stories to explain what they don't understand. Claire squeezed my hand. How are things between you two now? I looked out at the river, at the golden light on the water. Not good. She's angry at me. About money, about choices I made when she was younger. I thought I was protecting her, being responsible. She thought I was withholding, being stingy. That's hard. I'm sorry. I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know if she wants me to try. Before Claire could respond, a bell chimed. The coordinator announcing that dinner was ready, that guests should head downstairs to the reception space. The crowd began moving toward the stairs, and Claire gave me one more quick hug. Good luck, Maggie. I hope you two find your way back to each other. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and followed the crowd inside. The reception space had been completely transformed since the ceremony. The white chairs were gone, replaced by long rectangular tables draped in white linen. Each table had a centerpiece of white roses, eucalyptus, and candles in varying heights, creating pools of warm light. Edison bulbs hung from exposed beams in the ceiling, and the concrete floor had been polished to a soft shine. In one corner, a DJ was setting up equipment, and a small wooden dance floor waited empty. I found the seating chart near the entrance, a large frame with calligraphied table assignments. I scanned the list, finding my name at the very bottom. Maggie Collins, Table 9. Table 9 was predictably at the very back of the room, partially hidden behind a decorative column. My table mates were already settling in when I arrived. Dan's cousin Martin from Vermont, who immediately launched into a monologue about his new Tesla. Dan's elderly great-aunt Judith, who was deaf and kept asking people to repeat themselves. a groomsman's girlfriend who had her phone propped against her water glass and was scrolling through Instagram, and an older couple, Tom and Susan something, who I eventually figured out were friends of Dan's parents from their country club. "You must be Emily's mother," Susan said as I sat down, her tone bright and curious. "Caroline mentioned you'd be here? How lovely." "Thank you," I managed, unfolding my napkin. "Such a beautiful ceremony." Emily looked absolutely radiant. "You must be so proud." "I am. Very proud. And that venue? Goodness, this must have cost a fortune. But I suppose for your only daughter's wedding, you spare no expense." She smiled expectantly, waiting for me to confirm or elaborate. I took a sip of water, my throat tight. "It's beautiful." From my seat, I had a clear view of the head table, which was positioned on a low platform at the front of the room. Emily and Dan sat in the center, flanked by their wedding party, 6 bridesmaids on one side, 6 groomsmen on the other. The table was decorated with cascading flowers and candles, and behind them was a backdrop of more greenery and lights. They looked like they were posing for a magazine spread. Servers began bringing out the first course, a butternut squash soup with creme fraiche and toasted pepitas. It was beautifully presented, the soup a perfect golden orange in white bowls. I picked up my spoon and managed a few bites. It tasted like nothing. Around me, my table mates made conversation. Martin talked about electric vehicle charging stations. Aunt Judith asked someone to pass the bread 3 times before anyone heard her. The girlfriend took photos of her soup from multiple angles. Tom and Susan discussed their recent river cruise through Europe. I sat quietly, pushing soup around my bowl, watching Emily at the head table. She was laughing at something Simone was saying, her head thrown back, her hand on Dan's arm. She looked relaxed, joyful, completely at ease. When was the last time I'd seen her laugh like that around me? The soup was cleared and replaced with the second course, pan-seared salmon with roasted asparagus and fingerling potatoes, or herb-crusted chicken for those who'd requested an alternative. I'd gotten the salmon. It was cooked perfectly, the skin crispy, the flesh tender and pink. "I ate maybe 3 bites. Not hungry?" Susan asked, nodding at my plate. "Just a little nervous," I said. "Weddings always make me emotional." She patted my hand sympathetically. "Of course. Your baby girl all grown up. It's bittersweet, isn't it?" If she only knew how bitter, how little sweet there was in this for me. Dinner continued through multiple courses, salad with candied walnuts and goat cheese, the main course, a palate cleanser of lemon sorbet. Everything was expertly prepared, beautifully presented, and completely wasted on me. I was going through the motions, cutting food into small pieces, moving it around my plate, occasionally taking a bite when Susan was watching. Finally, the coordinator tapped on a microphone at the head table. "Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all enjoying dinner. We're going to pause for some toasts now. First up, we have Dan's father, Richard Brennan." Richard stood, impeccable in his dark suit, completely comfortable with public speaking. "Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight to celebrate Dan and Emily. As father of the groom, I've been told to keep this short." Laughter rippled through the room. "Dan, from the day you were born, you've been a source of joy and pride. Watching you grow into the man you are, thoughtful, principled, committed to making the world a better place, has been one of the greatest privileges of Caroline's and my life." He turned toward Emily. "And Emily, from the moment Dan brought you home for Thanksgiving 4 years ago, we knew you were special. Your intelligence, your passion, your dedication to justice. You've enriched Dan's life immeasurably, and ours as well. Welcome to the family," he raised his glass. "To Dan and Emily. May your love continue to grow stronger with each passing year." Everyone drank. I lifted my champagne glass automatically, the bubbles burning my throat. The best man stood next. Kevin, Dan's college roommate. He was funny, telling stories about Dan's terrible cooking attempts in college, about the time he tried to adopt 6 stray cats in 1 week, about how Dan had called him at 2 a.m. after his first date with Emily, unable to sleep because he was so excited. "I've never seen Dan like this with anyone else," Kevin said. "Emily, you've made my best friend happier than I knew he could be. Please take care of him and please teach him how to cook something other than frozen pizza." More laughter. To Dan and Emily. Then Carolyn stood, elegant in her champagne-colored dress, her pearls catching the light. "As mother of the groom, I want to say how grateful I am for this day. Dan, you've always had such a big heart. Always wanted to fix what was broken, help who was hurting. Emily, you match that heart with your own. Together, you're going to do wonderful things." She paused, her voice getting slightly emotional. "I look forward to the years ahead. Holidays together, hopefully grandchildren someday." People chuckled. "But most of all, I look forward to watching you two build a life based on love, respect, and partnership." "Welcome to our family, Emily. We love you already." She raised her glass and the room erupted in awes and applause. I clapped along, feeling each word like a small cut. "Welcome to our family. We love you already." "Everything I wanted to say," said by someone else. Simone stood next, the maid of honor. She was shorter than I remembered, with dark curly hair and an infectious energy. "Hi, everyone. I'm Simone, and I've had the honor of being Em's best friend for 11 years. So I have stories." She grinned wickedly and people laughed. "But really, I want to talk about what Emily's taught me. She's taught me that strength isn't about never needing help, it's about knowing when to ask for it. She's taught me that family isn't just the people you're born to, it's the people who choose you, who show up for you, who love you without conditions." My stomach clenched. Here it was again. Chosen family. The theme of the weekend. Em, you've built an incredible chosen family around you. People who see you, who support you, who celebrate you. And now you're choosing Dan to be your partner in all of it. Dan, you're one of the good ones. You see Emily for exactly who she is, and you love her not despite her independence and strength, but because of it. She raised her glass, tears in her eyes. To Emily and Dan, may you always choose each other, every single day. The room cheered and drank. At my table, Susan dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. "Such beautiful words," she murmured. I sat frozen, my champagne glass halfway to my mouth. Family isn't just the people you're born to. The message couldn't be clearer. I was the biological mother, but I wasn't part of Emily's chosen family. I was here out of obligation, not desire. The coordinator looked around the room, checking if anyone else wanted to toast. Her eyes passed right over me. Of course they did. The mother of the bride hadn't been given a microphone, hadn't been invited to speak, and that's when something inside me snapped. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the wine I'd been drinking on an empty stomach. Maybe it was 3 years of silence and hurt and longing finally reaching a breaking point. Maybe it was the theme of chosen family repeated over and over like a knife twisting. Maybe I was just tired of being invisible. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound cutting through the post-toast chatter. People nearby turned to look. Then more people. A hush began spreading outward like ripples on water. At the head table, Emily looked up. I watched her face go pale, then flush deep red. "I'd like to say something," I heard myself announce, my voice shakier than I wanted but carrying across the room. "If that's all right." The coordinator looked panicked, glancing between me and Emily. Vera started moving toward me, probably to gently suggest I sit down. But Dan caught her eye and gave a small nod. Vera hesitated, then gestured to a server who hurried over with a microphone. My hands were shaking as I took it. The microphone felt heavy, foreign. 200 faces were turned toward me now, everyone waiting. "Thank you," I managed. "I'm Maggie Collins, Emily's mother, and I promise I won't take much of your time." I looked at Emily. She was gripping Dan's hand so tightly her knuckles were white. Her face was a mask of controlled panic. "Emily, I just want to say, you are the most extraordinary person I know. You've been extraordinary since the day you were born, strong and determined and brilliant and kind. Being your mother has been the greatest honor and privilege of my life." My voice cracked. I swallowed hard, trying to steady it. I know things haven't been easy between us. I know I've made mistakes, so many mistakes. I know I've hurt you, disappointed you, failed you in ways I'm still understanding. And I'm so sorry for that. Mom, Emily's voice cut across the room, sharp and warning. But I couldn't stop now. The words were pouring out, 3 years of them. And I couldn't hold them back anymore. I just need you to know that every decision I made, every choice about money or priorities or what we could and couldn't afford, I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was being responsible, being careful, making sure we'd be okay. Your father's medical bills, the debt I didn't know about until after he died, the constant fear that one emergency would destroy us. I was trying to keep us safe. Emily stood up abruptly, her chair scraping back. The room went completely silent. "Don't," she said, her voice shaking. "Don't do this here. Not today. Emily, please. I just want you to understand." "Understand what?" Her voice was rising now, emotion cracking through. "That you had money while I worked myself into exhaustion? That you could have helped but chose not to? That you prioritized your own security over your daughter's well-being? That's not fair. No, what's not fair is you standing up at my wedding, making this about you and your guilt. What's not fair is you trying to rewrite history in front of everyone I love." She was crying now, mascara starting to run. Simone appeared at her side, arm around her shoulders. Dan stood too, looking stricken. "I'm not trying to—" I started. But Emily cut me off. "I've heard this speech before, Mom. The one about how hard it was, how scared you were, how you were doing your best. And maybe that's all true. Maybe you really were trying. But you know what? It still hurt. It still felt like being told I wasn't worth investing in, wasn't worth the risk. You were always worth everything. Then why didn't you act like it?" Emily's voice broke completely. "Why did I have to beg for piano lessons and school trips and help with college? Why did I have to feel guilty for needing things? Why did I have to work 3 jobs while you sat on Dad's life insurance money?" The room was absolutely frozen. I could hear my own ragged breathing through the microphone. "I think," Emily said, her voice calmer now, but cold, so cold, "that it's time for you to leave." The words hit like a physical blow, someone gasped. I heard murmuring ripple through the crowd. "Emily, please, I don't want to make a bigger scene than we already have." "But I can't," her voice wavered. "I can't have you here right now. I can't do this today. This is my wedding day and I need you to go." I opened my mouth but nothing came out. My vision blurred with tears. The entire room was staring at me. 200 pairs of eyes watching the mother of the bride get thrown out of her daughter's wedding. I set down the microphone carefully on my table. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I reached for my clutch purse, my movement slow and mechanical, and then Dan stood up. Dan pushed back his chair and stood, his jaw set, his eyes moving between Emily and me. The room, already silent, seemed to hold its collective breath. Even the servers stopped moving. He said quietly, but his voice carried in the stillness. "Sit down." Emily turned to him, surprise and hurt flashing across her face. "Dan, you don't understand." "Sit down," he repeated, firmer this time. Then he walked around the head table and came toward me. I froze, unsure what was happening. Was he going to escort me out? Make sure I actually left? But instead, he picked up the microphone I'd set down. He stood next to me, and when he spoke, his voice was measured but intense, every word deliberate. I need to say something, and Emily, I need you to hear this. Everyone needs to hear this. He looked out at the crowd, at all our wedding guests watching this family drama unfold. What just happened? That's not okay. And I can't start our marriage by letting it stand. Dan... Emily's voice was pleading now. No. Listen. He turned to face her directly. I love you. You know I love you. But what you just did to your mother in front of everyone we know, that's not the woman I married. That's your hurt talking, and I get it. I do. We've spent a year in therapy working through this. But there's a difference between setting boundaries and public humiliation. Emily's face crumpled. Her bridesmaids were gathered around her, uncertain whether to comfort her or give her space. Your mom's toast was awkward, Dan continued. Maybe inappropriate timing. But she came here today. She's been here all weekend, trying. She's been sitting in the third row at a back table, not complaining. Just trying to be part of your day in whatever way you'd allow. He gestured toward me, and I realized I was crying, tears streaming down my face, probably ruining the makeup I'd applied so carefully hours ago. And yeah, maybe she made mistakes when you were growing up. Maybe the communication was terrible and assumptions were made on both sides. But she's here. She showed up. And you just told her to leave your wedding in front of 200 people. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heart pounding. The woman I fell in love with, Dan said. His voice softening. She's kind. She's fair. She believes in complicated truths, in second chances, in forgiveness even when it's hard. That speech you gave earlier about chosen family, that was beautiful. But chosen family isn't supposed to be about excluding the people who actually raised you. It's supposed to be about expanding the circle, not shrinking it. He set down the microphone and walked back to the head table. He took Emily's hands in his, speaking to her now in a voice too quiet for the microphone to catch, but loud enough that the people nearest could hear. I'm not saying you have to fix everything with your mom tonight. I'm not saying you're wrong to be hurt or angry, but I am saying that asking her to leave your wedding like this, that's something you'll regret. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, and I won't watch you do something you'll regret. Emily was sobbing now, her carefully applied makeup running, her shoulders shaking. Dan pulled her into his arms, and she buried her face in his shoulder. Then he looked at me across the room and did something that broke me completely. He gestured to my table. Stay. Please stay. I stood there frozen, my clutch purse in my hand, tears pouring down my face, completely unsure what to do. The coordinator materialized beside me, her hand gentle on my elbow. Mrs. Collins, she whispered, please, sit down. Let's all take a breath. I let her guide me back to my chair. I sat down heavily, my legs giving out. Susan immediately handed me a napkin, and I pressed it to my face, trying to pull myself together. At the head table, Dan was still holding Emily, speaking to her quietly. The bridesmaids had backed off slightly, giving them space. The room remained eerily quiet, everyone unsure what came next. Finally, the DJ, bless him, seemed to realize someone needed to do something. Music started playing, something upbeat and generic, breaking the terrible silence. The coordinator clapped her hands. Okay, everyone! Let's take a short break before dessert. The bar is open. The terrace is available if anyone needs some air. We'll resume in about 15 minutes. People began moving, grateful for permission to escape the awkwardness. Conversation started up again, hushed and urgent. I sat at my table, clutching Susan's napkin, unable to move. Oh, honey. Susan said softly, her hand on my shoulder. Family is complicated, isn't it? I couldn't even respond. I just sat there, staring at the table, wondering how everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. The next 20 minutes were excruciating. I stayed in my seat while people milled around, some heading to the bar, others stepping onto the terrace for air and gossip. I could feel eyes on me, hear the whispered conversations. The mother of the bride who made a scene. The family drama everyone would remember long after they forgot the flowers or the food. Susan stayed with me, bless her, making small talk about nothing in particular, acting like everything was normal. Tom had disappeared, probably to find stronger drinks. Martin from Vermont had his phone out, undoubtedly texting people about the drama. The girlfriend was recording something for her Instagram story. At the head table, Emily and Dan were having an intense conversation, their heads close together. Simone hovered nearby, and a couple of the other bridesmaids kept trying to fix Emily's makeup, which was beyond saving. Eventually, Emily stood up and headed toward the bathroom, trailed by her entire bridal party. Dan watched her go, then looked around the room. His eyes found mine across the crowd. He said something to Kevin, then started walking toward me. I panicked, half standing. I should go. I should just... Please don't, Dan said, reaching my table. He pulled out the empty chair next to me and sat down. Up close, I could see the strain on his face, the tension around his eyes. This was his wedding day, and it had turned into a nightmare. Because of me. I'm so sorry, I whispered. Dan, I'm so sorry. I ruined your wedding. I shouldn't have stood up. Shouldn't have said anything. You didn't ruin anything, he said, though we both knew that wasn't quite true. It was bound to explode at some point. Maybe better it happened now than later. Emily must hate me. She doesn't hate you. She's hurt and angry and overwhelmed, but she doesn't hate you. He rubbed his face tiredly. We've been in therapy for over a year, working through her feelings about her childhood, about money, about you. She's made a lot of progress, but there's still so much unresolved. I never knew, I said, about the piano lessons, about her thinking we were poorer than we were, about any of it. She never talked to me. She just made assumptions and then resented me for them. And you made assumptions too, Dan said gently. You assumed she understood why certain decisions were made, why money was tight, what the context was. But she was a kid. She didn't have the full picture. I nodded, wiping my eyes with Susan's napkin. What happens now? Now you stay for the rest of the reception. You don't have to interact with Emily if she's not ready. But you don't leave. You stay and show her that even when things are hard and messy and painful, you don't abandon her. She told me to leave. She was upset. She said something in the heat of the moment that she'll probably regret. He looked at me seriously. Maggie, can I call you Maggie? I nodded. Maggie, I love your daughter. I'm going to spend the rest of my life with her, which means I have a vested interest in her relationships, including the one with you. I see how much pain she carries about your relationship. And I also see, maybe more clearly than either of you, that there's love there under all the hurt. My throat tightened. I don't know if love is enough to fix this. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But it's a start. He stood up. Stay, please, even if it's uncomfortable. Especially because it's uncomfortable. He squeezed my shoulder, exactly like he'd done after his speech, and walked back toward the head table just as Emily and her bridesmaids returned from the bathroom. Her makeup had been repaired as much as possible, and she'd clearly been crying more in the bathroom. But she was upright, composed, trying to salvage her wedding reception. The coordinator announced dessert would be served, individual chocolate lava cakes with vanilla ice cream and raspberry coulis. The cake cutting would come after. Then dancing. The reception would continue, drama notwithstanding. I ate a few bites of my dessert, the chocolate rich and bitter on my tongue. Around me, conversations had resumed, though I noticed people still glancing my direction. The story would live on, the wedding where the mother of the bride got kicked out, where the groom stood up for her, where everything fell apart during toasts. Emily and Dan cut their cake for photos, feeding each other small bites while the photographer captured it all. The DJ played their first dance song, something I didn't recognize, something that must have meaning for them. They swayed together in the middle of the dance floor, and despite everything, they looked happy. In love, right for each other. I watched from my table, fighting the urge to slip out. I'd promised Dan I'd stay, and I would. Even though every instinct screamed to run, to escape, to save myself from more humiliation. The dancing portion of the evening began. Emily and Dan did their special dances, her with Dan's father since her own father was gone, him with his mother. Then the dance floor opened up, and people flooded onto it, drinks in hand, the mood shifting from awkward to celebratory as alcohol and music did their work. I stayed in my seat. Susan had rejoined her husband, and they were dancing to some upbeat song from the 90s. My table was mostly empty now. Everyone off drinking or dancing or networking. Around 9:30, as the party hit full swing and Emily seemed lost in the crowd of her friends, I finally stood up. I'd stayed. I'd done what Dan asked. But I couldn't stay until the end. Couldn't force myself to endure another 2 hours of pitying glances and whispered gossip. I found Vera near the entrance. "Thank you for everything," I told her. "It was a beautiful event. I'm going to head out now." She looked at me with genuine sympathy. "Are you sure?" "The night's not over, I'm sure. Please tell Emily and Dan that I'm so happy for them, that I wish them every happiness." I slipped out before she could respond, before anyone could stop me, before I could change my mind. Outside, Chelsea was alive with Saturday night energy. The High Line still open and crowded, restaurants spilling diners onto sidewalk tables. I walked to 10th Avenue and hailed a cab, climbing into the back seat with relief. The drive home was quiet. The driver didn't try to make conversation. I watched the city pass by the windows, the lights of the West Side Highway, the darkness of the park, the familiar streets of my neighborhood appearing like a promise of safety. Back in my apartment, I hung up my dove gray dress carefully, washed off what remained of my makeup and changed into my nightgown. It was only 10 o'clock. Emily's wedding reception was still going strong, probably would go until midnight or later. I sat on the edge of my bed, exhausted and hollowed out. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent. No calls, no texts. Not that I expected any. I thought about Dan's words. There's love there under all the hurt. Was he right? Could we find our way back to each other? Or had tonight destroyed whatever fragile possibility had existed? I didn't have answers. But as I finally lay down and pulled the covers up, I realized something. I'd stayed. When Emily told me to leave, I'd almost gone, but Dan had convinced me to stay. And I had. For 3 more hours, through dessert and cake and dancing, I'd stayed. Maybe that didn't fix anything. Maybe Emily hadn't even noticed. But I'd stayed. And maybe, just maybe, that mattered. I closed my eyes, listening to the familiar sounds of my neighborhood, sirens in the distance, someone's TV through the wall, the rumble of the subway under the street. Tomorrow would come, and the day after that, and somehow, eventually, I'd figure out what came next. For tonight, I'd survived. That would have to be enough.